you so much.
Yeah,
So I
you're
guess
welcome.
I can start the first question and then open it to the crowd. But seems like research and investigation is such an imperative part of your work. So can you talk a little bit about how your process starts with these? And
Yeah, a lot of the process for me starts with, I guess, a fixation on some of these sorts of pests. Specifically more recently in things that we live with, whether or not we want to live with them, like termites. But also a lot of them stem from sort of these high school experiments. Like the best beetle comes from a penny pole kit that you can buy online that we did in physics once. So these investigations are things that I've always loved insects and lived with animals, and maybe it's also because I'm an only child and live in this sort of weird space by myself sometimes. But the investigation and research part is really imperative, and I get fixated on my relationship with one of these things, and then I spend years sort of seeing what that relationship means, and then what that means when I use the technology that I know how to use with them. So.
And do you collaborate with scientists?
I do.
Or
yeah, I
technologists?
seek a lot of scientists for am I giving real information, or that's something that, as someone with an art degree, I do have a lot of backgrounds in science-based courses, but I'm not a scientist. So I do seek scientists as collaborators, or at least sort of advisors all the time in almost every single one of these pieces.
And how is that experience for you as an artist?
It's interesting.
Two different languages.
Right. I really see the lab though as sort of a studio in a way, and I think there are a lot of artists that also work that way in sort of a bio-art sort of world. And once you find this right scientist that's willing to think about looking at data and experiments in this sort of way, it's a really great relationship to have, because there's something about science that's sometimes unrelatable to the public.
Right.
And I guess that's sometimes what I'm looking to penetrate, is how do we make ourselves relatable to things that we already exist with but don't really think about existing with.
And in a way, do you think of art as transformative? Like you really want to change the way people think or react to the environment and these?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what a lot of my pieces are about, is kind of rethinking about not only your relationship with these things, but your relationship with everyone, and what those relationships mean when they're together.
Do you think you're reflecting on that whole idea of the Western duality of culture and nature? Because I see that a lot in the work.
Yeah.
And do you look at these, especially the insects, as like the other, and are we just looking at them, or because you
That's
mentioned
a good question. Yeah.
How do you
Some of the in a lot of the older pieces, I feel like there's a lot of observing and less interaction. With the termite floor piece, I'm starting to want to break down that sort of looking us and them sort of space.
Voyeuristically in a way, looking at that,
in these spaces where they're still contained, obviously for reasons that I don't think you want termites in a space, but there's still an element of your body having to be closer to their body, or a way that you're looking at these things is more sort of focused. So in a lot of some of the earlier pieces, I feel like I was sort of shallow sometimes observing
them.
But I don't think that the observance was not informative in a way that it made you think about how to change your relationship with these things.
Which to me, that's a very interesting aspect of the duality, and then you as a woman who's dealing with technology, coming from the culture where nature and women, and then now you're looking at animals as or insects who we really don't have much of, like butterflies, as you were mentioning. Like when Damien Hirst did the butterfly scene, there was such a outcry of these butterflies are dying. Whereas what happens to these termites, for instance, afterwards? What do you do with them?
They stay with me. They live in these sort of idealized containers for themselves until they're...
So you keep them at home?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So these...
Does your landlord know?
That's funny, yeah. The one here must have looked me up online, because it says in our lease, no insects, no mammals, no... there was a long list of no's. But yeah, they do, they live in my office, they live in my space at home. I've kept them in my bedroom when I was trying to figure out times when they would be, especially the cockroaches, when they were most active at nighttime. I've had friends carry them for me in their purse it's cold outside. So they really travel with me quite a bit.
What's their lifespan for termites, for instance, especially?
They can live, I mean, I've had a set without a queen now for almost a year, which is a pretty long time. But once they can't repopulate anymore, they're sort of, you know, they're conditioned to go through the motions all the time regardless. Like there is a queen there, but there's not. So after there's kind of no one to replace them and they exhaust themselves and it's over. But all of the insects though have sort of a...
With the backpacks that you put on the beetles, for instance, I was thinking like if there was another animal or insect that we had a different relationship to, there would, maybe PETA will saying, oh, you're exploiting these. Whereas for, you know, with insects, we're like, oh,
exactly.
whatever.
There's actually, university-wise, there's no regulation on the use of insects. There's no animal rights, sort of, because they don't have a backbone. So that's a...
Which makes them the other,
you know,
right?
They're very much this sort of other alien creature. And so they're, that's why the Twitter roach is very, obviously you saw a lot of my work, it's very different. It's using that sort of body in a completely different way and not a sort of a positive way. It's kind of opposite, but there aren't any regulations for insects. There are for letting them go, but not for using them.
Exactly.
Right, that's it, yeah.
That's fascinating, actually. So I'm gonna just open it up and see, please share your ideas, comments, thoughts, questions.
None?
Caroline, you seem to be wanting to ask a question.
Well, I can't figure out if any of these are really that meritorious. I guess one question I've got that's more substantial potentially. I've been very interested in systems theory in general for a while, and then there is also something called systems art. And you did mention systems, and certainly all of your, or a lot of your pieces are systems.
Right.
So I just wondered if you wanted to elaborate on that aspect at all.
I'm really interested in the book Emergence, Steve Johnson, Emergence, and it's about, you know, cities and ants and computers and the sort of systems in between all of those things. And that's where they are all systems, but I haven't delved too far into system-based theories so much. But I do think about emergence a lot, and the sort of emergence that happens within the insect societies and within our own, and also these computer-based systems, and how the code that I'm writing is all systematic. And in a way, all of these insects are also completely systematic. They're just born instinctually systematic. But if there's a way that through these sort of interactions between us, if those systems can be altered or borrowed from. But that's something that is in the next sort of phase of my work, is thinking about those systems in a more deep sort of way.
Really interesting. I'm very excited to get to say something about it.
Yeah. Do you have some like other colleagues or inspirational sources? Like I see David Bowen a lot.
Yes.
Like
I don't know him personally, but he's like we've written a couple times back and forth, but his work he's one of my favorite artists.
I can totally see you guys like talking to each other with your work. I mean, he did that fly tweet. I
follow fly tweet. You know, that's the only thing I follow like 3 people on Twitter, and fly tweet is one of them. So. Yeah, David Bowen, Ken Ronaldo is someone else who was at Ohio State that I worked with quite a bit, and oh man, there's a whole list of people I could name. But
do you collaborate with any other artists in like these like bio art or environmental?
I've only collaborated with one group called Local Style, Marlena Novak and Jay Allen Yim, and they were working on we worked on a piece together that I didn't show today. With termites eating food menus, and we worked on it for a show that was all about food and consumption and what that meant. But they're an interesting pair that has worked with using electronic fish that essentially you can create your own orchestra based on, with a Wiimote, these fish in the containers, and you access that. But I haven't collaborated a lot. My collaborators at this point are sort of the insects, uninvitedly, you know.
Exactly.
Without sort of their permission. And it's not that I'm opposed to it, I guess I just haven't found the right piece for it yet.
Right, and then you're just starting teaching kind of like full-time in a way. Do you see doing these type of experiments in school, and do you see problems with that, like, you know, collaboration as far as art students and also coding and scientists? How do you bring them to...
Yeah, I don't think it's, I think it's kind of the opposite of a problem. You're in a great place for the opportunity to fail, but fail in a way that, you know, you might find something new or learn something from each other. So my biggest challenge as a researcher is having this being taken seriously from a scientific practice as a researcher, which is why when I do collaborate or sort of seek guidance from scientists, I guess that's where my collaborations sort of lie right now. But I think the university is sort of the perfect place to explore if you want to be a zoologist, artist, veterinarian, psychologist. It's the perfect place to do it with your colleagues, which is maybe why I enjoy teaching and being in that atmosphere so much, that I have access to people with the blips of knowledge that I want for all of these pieces.
Yeah, that's actually very...
The same goes for the students, right, guys?
Yeah.
They're like, no.
You have an interesting mix of skills with electronics engineering and computer programming and behavioral psychology. How did you pull all of these together? What's your educational background?
I guess I've worked just a lot of strange jobs, and when I was at Ohio State, it's such a huge university that you could do anything that you wanted to. You could be a chimpanzee psychologist if that's what you wanted to be. And so whenever there was a course that I thought was interesting, I just took it. It was just, I majored in art so that I could sort of wrap those things all together. But also in my personal life, I feel like I've had a lot of experiences that are all just really different. I worked as an exhibit technician for a while. I worked for a wastewater department, a city department for a long time. So I just have a lot of, I don't know, I have a lot of experiences that allow me to produce this sort of hybrid practice, I guess, and I use all of those. I don't think that's answering the question really, but.
Is it also knowing your resources, like who to go to when you need
in a way, yeah. I mean, and most of the time people they're interested and they want to, or they haven't thought about things this way. So it's pretty easy to be someone to just be accessible. Everybody's fairly accessible to all of these things too. And we live in a culture now where you can sort of, if you don't know electronics, you can YouTube, you know, basic circuit bending. So the skills that you can learn are sort of endless, which is, I can constantly keep relearning these skills or learning new ones if I want to, just because of the technology too, so.
Do you document the results? Obviously you make videos and you have exhibitions and that sort of thing, but is there also any write-up that would be of potential interest to scientists, or do you just invite them to the opening?
That's a good question. At this point, I write a lot of my own papers, but I guess interested in finding someone that would help me solidify the research in a really concrete sort of, you know, reputable way. Right now, I think 3 of the pieces have like extensive sort of theses written about them, but by me. And then, you know, I sort of show these things and get feedback on how feasible. I guess a lot of these pieces aren't over, or some of them aren't over. So I don't have any concrete, like, you know, here's the results, but I would like to. That's, especially for a lot of the pieces based on energy, that's necessary, you know, for them to keep moving forward.
Since especially you have your students here, how did your MFA help you with, you know, that program, especially being in the University of Illinois? Like, how did you put those, did it help you find, like, how to write the papers, or how to put these kind of shows together in a way?
Yeah, the MFA, I mean, it was more of a computer science program really than anything else, in a way, which was great, because I went to kind of hone those skills that I had learned a little bit, but more of like in a dabbling sort of way.
Because you came from the fine art background, right?
And they're both still fine arts degrees, but this one was really specialized in that we had the electronic visualization lab, which is this huge lab that they're doing all sorts of weird computer visualization projects over there. But as far as writing goes and reading, I mean, if anything, the MFA was fantastic to gain just 2 years of reading resources. And also, again, it was really important to me. I applied to places like the Art Institute, Carnegie Mellon, but I wanted to go to a research school. Not only because I had come from one, but I wanted to have access to people doing all sorts of things instead of just a fine arts.
And the program was kind of diverse, right?
Yes.
I mean, different kind of backgrounds. I know
we all,
some of the
we all
grads
came
there.
from different places. I came from a fine arts background, but we had someone from communications. We had someone that had gotten a degree in like biomedical visualization.
Some from computer science,
computer
like
science,
completely, yeah.
and so it was a really broad program, which was actually really great.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
I am teaching a course called Art and Code, which is technically my classes right now, so that's why they're all here. Art and Code is it's a coding-based course where essentially we're making visualizations that exist two-dimensionally, so mostly screen-based things, but they don't have to. So like the Twitter Roach project is actually the same programming language that they're learning in that class. So it's a language that, it's a C and Java-based programming language that they could essentially use for anything. And then I'm also teaching physical computing, which is a similar coding language. However, I also teach basic circuit building and construction and hacking. And then they use those for interactive sculpture or installations and environments like that. And then next semester I'll be teaching something called Technology in the Body, which is a class that focuses primarily on how we can program interfaces for the body. And not necessarily our body, any sort of entity as a body, bugs, dogs, people.
And the class builds objects at the end of the semester? Or
They're building interfaces. One's like an extension of the body, one is technology in the body in an urban space and in a non-urban space.
And for this semester too, like
this semester in Art and Code they produce primarily two-dimensional screen-based projections. In physical computing they build objects. So I've had students working on sound installations, light installations, all different.
But using code as the actual material.
Using code as the material.
Right.
That's the bottom line for both courses, is code as a material.
And you see technology in your work. How do you approach technology? Like, do you see that as your material?
I do. I see it as a material.
Yeah. And the bugs are the other.
Yeah, you know, I think that it's important to start thinking about these technologies as a material. You know, it's to me like a paintbrush, and it's the same sort of, you know, way. It's just a different method of making. So the code is the material in a lot of ways, or one of many.
Yeah, I was listening to Minovich the other day, like giving a presentation, and he was saying like how we learned to make PowerPoint presentation. Now we need to learn coding, because that's like that is where we are going. We can't just stick with
what's already there.
Which makes a lot of sense in a way for artists and technologists and media artists. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Well, thank you so much, Brittany.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And it's very nice to have